Hey, it's Brian Icenhower. Welcome to our spring and summer of 2025 industry update. And what I'm attempting to do right here is a few things. First of all, we're going to go through and talk about the state of the real estate industry and the overall economic market as it may relate to our practice in real estate and what that means to you, what that means to your clients. Secondly, it's to provide you with the talking points and materials that you could be using in listing presentations, buyer consultations, in your marketing and otherwise. So I'm going to actually show you and go through a whole lot of data on visual slide presentations, and then uh, you'll have those presentations to include in your listing consultations and buyer packets so you can better explain and then have my talking points so you can understand them and be able to explain how that's going to impact them in their decisions with regards to the purchase and sale of their home. And then finally, there's going to be how this is going to impact real estate professionals moving forward and how we need to adjust and adapt to this changing market. And I think before I start, I do want to say I've been doing this for more than 3 decades, and I can tell you it always seems like every market is challenging and changing for very different reasons. And I really don't see a lot difference in this one. There's new reasons and there's new things to be concerned about, but trying to say this is any more severe or difficult, I think you're going to quickly see is just not the case. So I say that for the main point of just trying to settle us down, and I will prove that to you by the information I'm about to share with you. So let's dive right in to that presentation. And again, this is going to be our industry update. And I'm going to start with sales first and foremost, right? I'm going to start with real estate sales. And that more or less is how it impacts real estate professionals. I'm pretty sure the consumers aren't overly concerned with how much sales volume is going on. That's just usually us in the business that gets more concerned with that, right? So this is something that I do want to show you. This is the number of US annual home sales, okay? And those are clearly down. Less homes are selling, and we're going to see it's because of rising interest rates and a lack of housing inventory is what contributes to that. We are projecting an uptick because we see improvements, certainly in inventory for sure, and possibly interest rates. Those are very tough to predict, as I think we're all starting to find out. But you can see we've had many worse years, and usually those are the dark years, right? After the Great Recession, we had a very low number of sales in those years. And then they started ticking back up and slowly. But I can tell you right now, we are not far behind the years of 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, even moving all the way into 2019. Those were some of the best years in real estate. They were a steady upward moving market. So we're not far off from that. We are far off from what we're used to, though, right? We had a real big year during and post pandemic where we got up to a very high number of home sales. It did tick down in 2022. That hurt. And it really hurt in 2023 and 24 is where we really started to feel it in the profession. And now we are projecting an increase. And I think I'm going to be able to show you why. However, it's a different side when you look at total sales volume, which is obviously what happens when you add all the sales prices together. Believe it or not, this is the more important side because although less homes sold, the total volume is, we looked at the third best year in history and we're projecting to eclipse that as well too. And a big reason for all these volume increases is just because I have sales prices going up, values of homes increasing. And we get paid on a percentage of sales volume, not for the number of homes we sell. So there may be fewer opportunities out there with homes selling, but those that are taking advantage and getting those homes for sale are actually going to have more income than most years in history. Even the housing boom of 2004, 2005 to even 2006, those big years, much more commission dollars are being earned now than back then. So understand there are still, even in these tough years, there's much more commission dollars being earned than in years past. We really have to go after those transactions and go after those buyers and sellers clients because they're worth a lot more. So please understand the opportunity is still there, and the ones that have the systems set up and are still out there trying to get new business are the ones that are getting their unfair share here. New home sales. This is new home, new construction, new development, new builds, whatever you want to call it. We are seeing a lot more of those as anticipated, not nearly enough, but we are seeing a lot more. You can see we overbuilt new home sales for many years, even 2003, 2004, 2005. We saw numbers up here. Then it started to dip After the Great Recession, a lot of builders went out of business and got spooked. They stuck their necks out a little too far, and then we've been underbuilding for a very long time. Finally, we climbed up there in 2020, but then the pandemic hit and we dipped back down because of fears with that. And we're projecting an increase. We are getting above the average. It's just going to take a long time and a lot of new construction before we can get caught up with the demand. And stay tuned. There'll be more on that later too, right? But new construction's coming up and they're starting to actually provide more inventory. Again, there's not too much inventory, that's for sure. That's when you start getting distressed property sales. We're not seeing much there at all. The idea that foreclosures are coming and short sales and things like that, like we saw back in the Great Recession of 2008-9, that's a very long way away. I don't think we should be worried about that, which is why I'm not going to spend much time. So don't believe the clickbait in the news there. Okay, average days on market. We're not seeing much change there either nationwide. Now, there are some exceptions. I will say there's a few states, typically the post-pandemic states, that are suffering on home prices and days on market. And those would include, but not limited to, but I would include Texas, Tennessee, Florida, even Idaho, the places where a lot of people fled to during the pandemic. That also leads to oversupply and maybe prices inflating too much. And so we are seeing some prices come back. And as a result, average days on market can get a little bit inflated because of those areas, since we're talking about the entire United States. But again, it's pretty steady, man. We're seeing average days on market with a few blips in here, which are usually seasonal, which is usually winters and things like that. We are seeing it hold steady at a very rapid pace. So buyer demand is out there compared to the amount of supply available, and we're just not seeing big increases there at all. So if you're feeling that, you may be in one of those markets, or you may be overpricing and it's sitting, or there may be something wrong with the house, or maybe a unique property and you need to have a little bit more patience. Usually one of those things. So that's usually how we communicate to our clients to set proper expectations based on those factors. Moving on. Average volume per agent. This is interesting. It's very much in alignment with the total sales volume. The average volume per agent is going up, okay? Other than the pandemic, we are looking at right next to the highest levels agents were selling, and therefore we can assume earning per transaction. And that's because those high price point agents leaving the business because there's fewer sales to go after. But at the same time, if you know how to get them, if you know how to fish, you're seeing very lucrative careers all over the place. And we're projecting an increase there too, for more reasons I'll show you. New residential listings. So this is neat and very interesting. We do have the January, and these usually lag 2 or 3 months behind. So now we're well towards the end of March now. And so we can see the new residential listings that hit the market in January of 2025, way out to the right side of your screen here. And we had 406,000 across the country. Compared to last January, we had only 325,000. The January before, 310,000. So it looks like new inventory is on the way, which is very much a relief. It's one of the main reasons we're projecting an increase in volume, home sales, everything. It's because we're starting to see inventory hit the market. I do think that February was significantly lower than that number, but in alignment with past February. So I think you're going to see more inventory. Will it be enough? Probably not. I don't think it'll be enough, which is what keeps home prices going up. Supplies not keeping up with demand. So that's not a bad market. That's a seller's market. That's a good market for real estate agents. So don't wish for too much inventory. That can be a problem. Then your listings just sit. So that's the exciting news right now, is we've just seen a big blip on new residential listings come on the market. Moving on, now getting over to prices. This is very important for your buyers, especially. It can also be very important for sellers, especially those replacing and moving into buyers, because we're real stable here, gang. Annual home prices, this is about as healthy as a graph as you can see. And it goes back to 1990 on this. This is how much the annual median home price in thousands, up to 419,000 is what we're projecting, finished out last year at 408,000. That's because that supply and demand issue. You can see it's been steadily growing up, even through some tough pandemic years where things were going up and everybody's saying things were crashing. This is a U.S. national average. Again, real estate is local, but those local markets tend to correct and get back in line pretty quick unless the building can't be stopped. If we oversupply a market too much, we know what happens. That was back here in this dip. And look at how minor that dip looks. Those of us that lived through the Great Recession, and all the banks closing and all that, and how terrible that was on real estate, it looks pretty dang minor with regards to price appreciation and depreciation. We had it all back by 2014. We were right up to like peak levels, getting up there, getting all the equity back pretty darn quick. And it felt like it was going to be the end of the world. Sometimes we feel that now. We go back and look at the numbers. It really wasn't as bad as maybe the media or our friends are saying. I see the same. I see another price increase. I see a bigger price increase this year. And the main reason I see it is because of increased inventory. More home sales going on the market means more movement. And that median will move up because there's much more at these higher prices with demand still outpacing buyers. As we've seen, mortgage rates going up and even potential recessions and things like that, they have never been enough to impact home prices. The main factor is where's our inventory at? And if it's low, home prices go. Supply and demand is the key, number one economic principle. Very few things can get in the way of that. And if you're comparing supply versus demand, that's why they call it supply side economics. It's much more important. Things can hurt demand, but if there's not enough supply, you're going to see prices go up. Very important economic principle to remember, because boy, can we get off focus on that with all the bad news we tend to hear out there in the world. Another map that makes it look pretty good too. Take a look at this one. This is the median home price of houses sold. The last one was annual. This one is basically a steady running line graph that kind of connects the dots for you and shows how steady of investment real estate is. This one and the last one need to be in every buyer consultation packet if they're waiting for prices to come down. As you can see, it's very hard to time these little tiny blips. The gray shaded lines indicate recessions, which means we had 2 consecutive months of GDP decreases. And we did have one, a technical one because of COVID. I don't put in here. It was an artificial one. But again, it did not impact prices in a negative fashion in any shape or form. I think we were afraid of that. But fortunately, prices just skyrocketed after that. So you can see real estate is dictated by that supply and demand. I will point out that throughout the 1990s, late 80s, we were very flat compared to years previous and years after. And some of that's going to, play into some of the later slides here. It did increase at a very temperate pace, a very moderate pace, but you can see it's been nothing but increases. And yes, some uncertainty after COVID with interest rates reduced the amount of home sales, which it causes comparable sales at a high level to keep driving prices up. So especially people that have a lot of income, they tend to live in higher priced houses and they're not forced to sell, especially if they're sitting on a 3% interest rate. So the higher price homes tend to sell less. And when higher price homes sell less, the median home price doesn't grow as much. Sales volume can still go up because there's tons of other houses selling. But I think as we're seeing now, people are starting to acclimate to the new interest rate levels and people are starting to sell and they're starting to move because life wants them to move, not because they're trying to save a nickel. They're getting on with their lives because they need to. Moving on, annual appreciation of home prices. You can see the ups and downs a little bit different way right now. We are predicting, you can see all the way out to the right side, a good healthy increase. They always say 4%, maybe 4.2% has been the national average. You can see in those boring 90s, it was very flat in those times. And then all of a sudden, we had some rate drops and some good economic commissions. Supply and demand got back in whack, and wham, we hit a boom. And you can see we had a few years of drops here. And it was really 2 main years in 2008 and 9 that represented the biggest drops. There's a couple of relatively flat years in here. And then all of a sudden we started going back to the races and we saw a very healthy, I always call it the golden age of real estate. And that's 2012 all the way to 2021, where home price appreciation just went through the roof. And if you look at what that looks like, you can see how steep this climb is through that period here. It's just phenomenal. And agents made a lot of money. And now we're starting to see some volatility, but home prices are really steady. Okay, moving forward, you can see this is one thing to keep in mind. This is why you see so much clickbait out there, is when people use month over month pricing. The media does this a lot. It's really important. This time of year in spring and summer, you're going to see prices jump a lot month over month. Why? Those higher priced homes start hitting the market because they know it's a peak time to list. It's when most buyers are out there looking, wanting to move too. So they wait because they don't have to sell their house to move. They oftentimes move out of their home and get it all fixed up, ready to sell. And they've already bought another house so they can afford 2 mortgages at once. A lot of higher priced homes do not sell in the winter. That's usually the people that need to replace their existing mortgage so they can currently sell their home and buy their home and close right in a row so they're not paying two mortgages. So that gives the appearance of prices dropping month over month as we move into fall and winter. And then when the higher priced homes start hitting the market, it gives the appearance every year. This is cyclical. We have seen this going back as far as I can remember, which is 35 years in the business. It's always been like this, and I don't see anything that's going to change it. So when you start hearing that and your clients start seeing and reading that prices are going up, or in the fall and winter prices are starting to drop month over month, we have to be able to correct them. That's normal. It's year over year. Otherwise, we're just panic selling like the media often is. Okay. The media has a very hard time differentiating between sales stats and price stats. And then they have a tough time with that. They're not economists. So they'll say the real estate market's crashing because sales volume went down, yet prices are skyrocketing. The only people that care about sales volume crashing is those of us in the real estate industry. So understand there's two different markets between prices and sales, and they are not necessarily going to run in alignment. Right now, sales for the last couple of years, sales volume has gone down and home prices have continued to rise, totally opposite directions. And the media has a hard time differentiating. So we need to be the person that differentiates for our clients that way. Okay. These are some home price appreciation predictions from all these different respected people, right? The average prediction is the red line across the middle. And you can see we've got people predicting a 5.5% increase, a 4.9. These are all increases. Then it gets all the way down to the very end where you got like, these are the people that really had a tough time in the Great Recession. Morgan Stanley had a horrible time. They had to be bought, merged in. And then Moody's was the ones that everyone blamed for grading all those mortgage-backed securities as grade A when they were really stacked with bad loans. Freddie Mac also looking to get spun off and get privatized right now. So I'm not sure I put a lot of credibility in because I cannot imagine how home prices are going to go down this year with the lack of inventory. Supply side is just too low. So I really discount those. It's just a matter of how much is going to go up this year. And we're predicting right in this area right here, right around Goldman Sachs. I think I said 4.3%, and they're at 4.4%. I think right in that. I like my company. I can be with Warren Buffett and Goldman Sachs, and they seem to get things right quite a bit. Buyer consultations, the vast majority of people are predicting an average prediction of just above 3%. And the vast majority of everyone is calling for home price increases. So it doesn't have to be you predicting things. It's nice to just rely on the experts sometimes. It's also important for people that like to hoard money right now and wait for prices to come down, wait for interest rates to come down. Even for move up buyers, like you own a home and you're moving up. That's investing more in real estate. So if you own a $300,000 home and you're looking to move into a $550,000 home, you're investing $250,000 more into real estate equity. And if you don't, and you're waiting because of a little interest rate, understand that's very dangerous because that money is going down in value due to inflation. Think of the peso. If you had 20 pesos back in the day, now that's worth nothing. That's what happens when the value of money goes down, which is what inflation causes. Yet we've seen how much real estate increases. If you're a new home buyer, there's a no-brainer and you're just paying rent because you're trying to save money and you like seeing a lot of money in the account. You'd be much better served having it in real estate because the value of money goes down with inflation while prices go up. And you can see home price appreciation compared to relative inflation rates. You can see the inflation rates went up pretty substantially post-COVID because of all the economic stimulus that was being provided and maybe government spending, things like that. You can see we've got a couple years here where inflation got 2 and 3 times higher than what we were used to. And the Fed seems to be doing a pretty good job of landing the plane and bringing it back down. We got 2.8% was the average last year, and they're trying to get down to 2%. And then they'll feel comfy with that because that's back in alignment with historical averages. Pay attention, these are decades, okay? So the decades, we had 1.9% from 2000 to 2010, and then 2010 to 20, we had 1.5%. That's gone up. But all the while, home prices, the average home price appreciation for those decades and these individual years of 21, 22, 23, and 24 far outpacing it, oftentimes doubling and tripling it. We got to get that money to work for us, not sitting in banks where it feels comfortable to look at it every month. Get the thing earning money rather than going down in value. Here's another way to look at that same argument, and it's very important we're able to articulate this because the people that bought real estate sooner tend to be the ones that have the most money, not those that wait. And that's true with investment properties. That's true with stepping up into higher price properties. All are just investing more in real estate. And you can see the years, if we compare projecting out in the future here on the left side in the yellow, if we project out the years 2025 to 2029, if we just estimate your average home price appreciation, which the average over time is 4%. You've seen all the predictions on that. If we're just conservative with that and just say, okay, it's just going to increase at that level the whole time, that's how much more they are going to pay as home prices go up. We're talking a cumulative here, 6, 9, almost 15% more. And if you're buying a $500,000 house, we're talking a whole lot of money there. You're going to spend a lot more money, right? Yet over here, you can see the per dollar amounts based on the average home price, how much more that goes up in value. So that difference is about $83,000 that you're going to pay more and that you'll lose out in equity that'll be in your bank. So it's almost like a double swing there. You buy now and you've got $83,000 of equity. You wait, you're paying an extra 83,000, so you're talking about a difference of $166,000. That's like a very good salary in America that you're just missing out on because you're waiting and just staring at your money stagnating in the bank or in a CD or a mutual fund relative to what could be earning if you put it to work for you. And we have to be good at explaining that as real estate professionals. It's absolutely crucial. Okay, moving forward, let's talk about inventory because remember, supply controls home prices and therefore sales. Hot markets are low inventory markets. And that gets a buying frenzy going that jumps up sales like you wouldn't believe. And you've seen we had too much inventory back in that housing boom of 2006, 2007, 2000. We had just houses sitting on the market. That's what a buyer's market looks like. Traditionally, anything above this 6 month of inventory supply line, which means if there weren't any new listings put on the market, we'd look at all the listings that are currently on the market, and at the current rate of sales, it would take 6 months to get them all sold, right? That's a balanced market traditionally, right? We've been operating in a seller's market for a long time. We are still very far from a seller's market because last year we had 3.7 months of inventory, which previous to this Great Recession, it had been probably since the 1970s or 60s since we saw 3.7. This is definitely a hot market, and 4.2 months is a hot market as well. The housing boom was 2003, 4, and 5, and same months of inventory. Like I said, the golden age, we were operating with more inventory. I would say the best years of the housing boom were the lowest inventory years. 2021, pandemic, 2020, pre-pandemic. We're talking 2019, all had less. Agents were making a ton. 2017, 18, 19, all had less inventory than we're projecting this year and about the same as we had last year. So we need to put things in perspective. We're all used to 2021 right now when everybody went crazy and made a lot of money immediately following the pandemic stimulus. Okay. We got to put it in perspective. This is not that bad. We just have to shift back to some of those practices that we all were so successful with back in those amazing golden years of real estate. Okay. If you want to know why housing inventory is low and is going to stay low, this is the chart for you. This is the average amount of building over the course of time. It also represents an equilibrium, a buyer's and seller's market of 6 months of inventory. And that's the way economics tends to work out. They tend to hover about the same. And you can see leading up to the Great Recession, where everybody stopped building because banks were collapsing and funding was so tight, we overbuilt like you wouldn't believe. I mean, for almost a decade. And then it actually got to 4 years of record setting. We've never come close to being able to build as much as we did in those 4 years, oversupplied the market, which is the only way prices can drop. Like I said, buyer demand will never hold a candle to supply. You oversupply a market, they're going to sit and people are going to drop prices. So you had builders out there dropping prices for the first time below resale averages. If you see that in your area, if you see a lot of building permits getting reported, way more than normal, the way you can tell it's coming is if all of a sudden you start seeing new home construction pricing below the average resale price. That's not the case. It's nowhere near it. Usually new home construction is much more expensive for this reasons and many others. They can get higher prices, cost of labor, cost of demand, tariffs, you name it, those keep prices up, which actually keep all the prices up. This was the one time in the Great Recession where new home construction was actually having to undercut because of overbuilding and drop below resale prices. So you can see, I mean, for 17 straight years, we've been well below our average. It's going to take a long time before supply can catch up with demand at this rate. Okay. More on that later. Here's later. Okay. This is an idea of population growth versus new homes built. And you can see the gray lines talk about how many people are being born, and the blue lines are how many homes are built. And these are by decades down below, except for the end, I just used the last 4 years. And you can see throughout history, with the exception of the Great Depression, which is also akin to the Great Recession that happened shortly after, homes built is almost mirroring the amount of population, which keeps supply and demand in equilibrium until the Great Recession happened, and boom, for the next decade, very few homes were built, but we kept on having babies like we do. And that really hasn't changed. I think we're getting a little bit more in alignment. We were from 2010 to 2020, we had 4.5 times more of growth in population than we had homes being built. Right now, we're like, twice as much. So it's only 2 times more people in the country than new homes built. That's refreshing that we're catching up, but again, we're not getting ahead. So I don't see supply even remotely catching up with demand. In fact, in theory, we're getting further and further behind, which is an indicator to me that we are going to be okay with home prices for a long way to come. Unless the government oversupplies the market, the government's not going to have an impact on this, guys, because it would take something very drastic with demand. And we've seen a lot of drastic things: pandemics, recessions, we've seen tariffs, you name it, NAR settlements. We've seen it all. Mortgage rate increases, all those things all hurt demand, and they were always going to drop prices, and none of them did. The only thing that's ever done it is in the Great Depression and Great Recession, which are roughly 100 years apart, maybe 70, 80 years apart, where we oversupplied markets. And so I don't see that happening anytime soon. So yay, yay for home prices, home values, and equities in your homes. New construction home starts. Again, we talked about new construction earlier, and we can talk about home starts. Again, yes, good. We're finally up over the average, but compared to, I just showed the tail end here of the new construction home sites, but they were high for a few years before that too, as we saw before. We're just getting up to making a dent. Maybe we're going to tread water on new construction home starts because we got so far behind after the Great Recession. Moving on, mortgage. This is actually very important right now because mortgage rates are now back in play, right? You can see what happened in the 80s where inflation was extremely high. Things were much different. And remember what happened in the 80s. Home prices went up. Sales were still increasing despite these high interest rates, much higher. We're talking 6 times higher than what we're talking about today. And then down into the 80s and 90s, they were still high. You can see throughout the 90s, you have an average interest rate of around 8%. And it wasn't until we started manually bringing mortgage rates down, which is very different than the interest rates that the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell comes out and announces. That's the federal funds and discount rate. Usually there's a close, similar, or symbiotic relationship between the funds rate and the mortgage interest rate. But the mortgage interest rate is tied to a natural algorithm that is tied to the 10-year Treasury bond sales. So without getting into a deep analysis for you there, when we stopped buying back our own mortgage-backed securities and we started pumping stimulus into the economy and maybe some government spending in there, we see interest rates go up to offset inflation. So for the first time, we're seeing interest rates go up. And now we're starting to see them kind of land back down. A lot of things can help bring those down. We'll cover here in a minute. We're on a healthy trend to bring lending rates back down well below industry averages over the last 50 years. I know it's not what we're used to, but by no means are these high rates. So please don't call them high rates. I remember killing for rates like this. Never thought we'd see them. You can make just as much money, especially when people acclimate. It can hurt sales a little bit when they first go up because they went up fast. So that actually did drop sales, as we saw in 2023 and 2024. But once people accumulate, people are going to move for a lot of reasons, right? And they need to move, and they're not going to be slave to an interest rate. And they start to learn that. Moving on, annual mortgage rates by year. You can see as we move through this, we're projecting a slight decrease. It's very hard to predict mortgage rates to begin with. I would not be doing what I'm doing right now. I would be a golden goose in some investment banker's closet, and he'd be paying me a lot of money and feeding me well, because no one can predict interest rates, as we've seen the last few years. Everybody thought they were going to come down based on what's said, but different data comes out. And now we're seeing trade wars and trade tariffs and things like that, which can dramatically change rates in a lot of different ways. Last year, the average rate was 6.72%, and this year we're predicting it to drop to 6.65%. Just like we showed you on the last chart, a nice easy drop down. They're trying to land a plane here at 2% inflation, and the rates will typically drop if they're able to keep landing in an easy place. However, this is a huge prediction. There's a lot of things that can occur. There's so much happening in the news every single day that who knows what's going to jostle this one. So that's a very hard one for me to predict. It's really just a conservative guess. You can see what the other people are predicting. They're predicting the same thing because no one knows what's going to happen. You can see the Mortgage Bankers Association, Wells Fargo, and Fannie Mae all predicting an average drop of somewhere between the high sixes and the mid sixes. And they're predicting these changes to ease over each quarter. So a slow slide down over each quarter all the way through. So not major relief here coming soon this year if you trust these very conservative projections. And boy, I certainly wouldn't trust any projections with regards to interest rates. But that's the idea. And part of the problem we talked about is a lot of people don't want to move because of their existing rates. And you can see here that 34% of homeowners with mortgages have a 3 to 4% interest rate. 22% have 3% or less. Really good. Then you can see 4 to 5 rate, 18%. 10% have a 5 to 6% mortgage, and 16% of the population have a 6%. So you're going to start to see more and more. You can see prior to the last 2 years, this 16% didn't increase. And it's not just first-time home buyers. People have to move for lots of reasons: death, divorce, better school districts, more bedrooms, upsizing, things like that. And they should move. Holding on to an interest rate when they want to move is crazy, because the value of the home price that goes up in appreciation far outpaces what you're going to pay in your interest rate. Plus, you can always refinance that when the rates come down, which is when you would have waited to buy anyway. So it makes no sense to stay put because of a rate. If they are, it's because we're not able to communicate the content of the subject matter that I'm explaining to you right now. Using these slides should help. It's a lot easier to show and then tell. Okay. Here's what's really neat: total homeowner equity. I mean, we've never seen, we're going all the way back to 1950 here. Look at the amount of equity that homeowners have, because these home prices have been increasing over that period. I told you, over the golden age of real estate. Anybody that bought the bottom market, anybody that bought anywhere along the way, just saw a mass wealth accumulated. So they have the ability to buy more real estate and move up in real estate and buy more expensive homes. They very much should be moving up. Sitting on that rate is someone who doesn't understand finance and economics very well. If they're going to buy a bigger house, my goodness, you're going to lock that in and just refinance it anyway, and you're going to get to ride that appreciation line on up into the future, just like this chart shows in recent years. Okay, some general industry trends that are important to talk about. The other option is rent, and that's just been going up in value too. People are paying more and more rent on average. And this is the national average, right? So you got some low rents and some high rents all mixed in together, but rents are just going up. Why? There's less supply. When there's less supply, rents go up too. If there's big market problems, if there's major layoffs across the country, it just floods the demand side of it, and rents will even go up even further. So it's very tough. We saw that in COVID, people getting laid off all over the place and let go, and all of a sudden rents skyrocketed because you had 20 people looking at rental properties. So any economic distress or recession just causes this to drive up even higher. People sell houses for money. You've seen with federal employee layoffs, we're already starting to see that in micro markets with many of our clients, where rents are skyrocketing. They can't find a place because they got to sell those homes, and prices go up for renting. Annual inflation, another big one right here. Lately, we hit a number up here that was really high. This is a little bit different number. It's the CPI. It's the Consumer Price Index. It includes energy and food with it at 7%. The Federal Reserve target is this 2% line. You can see we've always hovered around it. since the 90s, but coming out of the 80s, it was way up there, as I showed you in our inflation line chart before. And you can see as we jumped around, always hovering around this 2% line, it spiked up, and they're trying to bring it right back down to that average of 2% inflation every single year. And you can see they've already brought it down to 2.9% inflation. That's a big move. Projecting them to get it down to 2.2% this year. Again, it's very hard to predict, just like the interest rate is, but they're doing a good job so far. So I have a feeling they're going to do what it takes to get it there. Again, you can see the rents here. This is different. It's not the average rent, it's the median rent, and it's year over year. You can see how it's just moved up tremendously over time. The same graph, same information here. It's a little higher number because it's median as opposed to average. But it looks a little bit more significant if you're showing it to somebody when you use the median numbers. But it's just jumping, and it's still jumping because of that lack of supply. This is important for you guys in a big way to use with people that don't think they need an agent or people that are looking to negotiate commissions. You can see that over time, home buyers purchase homes. We're talking almost 90% over time are using an agent. Okay. And do notice it jumped up significantly in the year 2010. We used to be at a number of 80%. Why? Primarily because of technology. People start that home search online and they find it themselves, but they need the agent even more. So technology has been nothing but our friend as agents. It's actually increased the number. Yet the public perception is we aren't going to need agents anymore because of technology. No, that has been quite the opposite. So please don't buy into that and get afraid, okay? 88% of people last year and 89 the year before use an agent. And the vast majority of those don't are using a builder or just buying directly with an agent from the builder, which means they're not getting buyer side representation, which I don't think is a good idea either. And the rest are FSBOs, for sale by owners. And you can see how few people do that all the time to save a commission. And what they miss and what other people miss when they're trying to negotiate their commission is the reason they need us is because if 90% of home buyers are using an agent, are we really marketing your property to the public? We're not. We're marketing to other agents. And if they don't have the tools, the connections, the resources, the MLS database, the MLS at all to be able to market to other agents, they're missing out on 90% of potential home buyers. So they're just looking at a small buyer pool. They'll never get multiple offers. They'll never be able to drive prices up. They're never going to get the most exposure for their property because most people rely on an agent to show them those homes, and they use one to get them those homes, and they use them for advice and everything else we know. But the important thing to convey is we don't sell houses primarily marketing them to the public. We market them to the other agents because the other agents are representing the buyers. That's the important thing I see most people miss when they're talking to people that are considering FSBOs or they're in a commission conversation where they're having to negotiate with a potential client to decrease the amount of commission or bring it up or justify it. This slide needs to come out. So it's a listing consultation slide. It's a FSBO listing consultation slide. I'd always show this because it's shocking how nobody knows this. In fact, I'm guaranteeing a lot of you hadn't thought of it this way too. So make sure we use it, guys. This is good for you as an agent in your business. This is the NAR survey of home buyers and sellers every year. It's a really good source, and it shows how home sellers found their listing agents. And you can see over each year across the top that if you look at the sphere of influence, which is people that are referred by a friend, neighbor, or relative, or a past client, you add those two together, we're talking, 65% of all homes sold were through somebody's sphere of influence. Okay. That's pretty powerful. That's a good reason to get a sphere of influence together, stay in contact with it, add value, remain first of mind. The other 34% of sales, everybody's fighting over prospects, expireds, online leads, buying leads, circle prospecting. I can keep going, even farming, all of those different things. Everybody's fighting all for that little 35%, where the big chunk is laying in your own sphere of influence database. So I know it's boring. I know you heard it a million times, but guys, it's just not changing. If anything, it's getting stronger. So please, that's your foundation of your business. Do not neglect it. And more proof here, look at the number that either definitely the dark blue line or even probably the much smaller line, when surveyed, when a home buyer, would you use the same agent again? Okay. And almost always they're saying, 9 out of 10 say yes. So are we following up? Are we staying in contact? We're continuing our customer service with our clients afterwards, making sure everything's okay with the home. Do they need any contractors? Is anything broken? Can I help you? Making sure we're staying in contact, plus all the different ways we can stay in front of them to add value in their lives. Make sure we do it because most are willing, but very few agents are doing. Okay? The last thing I want to talk about trade policy and tariffs because we've now entered a trade war, so it's important till we know how this works. Again, I have no political message I'm trying to say here, but we've already seen this. This was again the late 80s, and throughout the 90s until the NAFTA agreement was signed, we did see trade wars. So this has happened before. And here's the general principle. I think you can find this in an economics textbook because it's happened before too. We start here in the middle. Country A, let's say the United States, levies tariffs on foreign goods from country B, let's say China. Those imported goods from country B become more expensive in country A, right? And because there's a tariff on them. If it's 25% tariff, it's a 25% tax or inflation in effect. Everything becomes more expensive. Because of that, country B is going to retaliate and do tariffs back. Another 25% that way. Countries, they get expensive both ways, right? So now country A's exports become very expensive when they're sold in country B. Sales go down, jobs go down, all those types of things. So therefore, importers, exporters, and consumers in both countries suffer. It's like a very heavy tax. When we see taxes increased and decreased by both political parties respectively, we're not talking about 25% differences. Okay, that's a very big one. So it's effectively like an inflationary impact. It's not fun in the meantime. So overall trade falls. And usually you do get an economic downturn. You get people calling for protectionism, which means buy Canada, buy China, buy USA only. Remember those days when everybody was buy USA? It's because we're in a trade war, right? So that stuff starts happening. Now, what could happen from that? It's hard to tell. It's very hard to predict. It depends. People could be bluffing right now and they may come to some agreements where they come down. It's hard to tell. If we're waiting for businesses like big manufacturing factories to come back and be built in the United States, that's tough for a few reasons. One, that's a big risk by a government to do. It could take 5 to 10 years. That's a lot of struggle economically for 5 to 10 years. And these aren't being enacted by legislation. They're being enacted by the executive branch, which is the president. And they can be undone by the next president. So am I really going to move my company back and endure all those expenses only to have them undone and see it was a bad move? So if legislation gets passed on this, that's much harder to undo, as we see everywhere, than what is effectively an executive order, which is undone by the very next company. So we'll see. Now, those are just factors to consider. I do not know the overall plan there. I don't think a lot of people know the overall plan. Another thing that could happen that's good, so I'll say something that way. I don't think this is the plan because there's easier ways to do this, but it could happen. It could be a way to hedge our bet. If we do enter a recession, that will likely force the Federal Reserve Chair to then drop rates to stimulate the economy again. Lower interest rates, can you imagine what that would happen in our real estate market right now? Everybody start buying like crazy. Sales volume goes up, that drives prices up, and real estate could be great again, along with other industries, but real estate would really feel in a good way. So both of those things could happen. And usually I like to predict. And this one I can't. I mean, you guys turn on the news every day. It's getting wild out there. I don't know if it's good or bad or what, but it's getting wild. And I don't know. And I think anyone says they know what's going to happen, that's a little bit of arrogance. I don't think anyone knows. Or there would definitely be companies making money off you right now. You should get in the job market. There'd be some big investment banker salaries waiting for you. But this could go a bunch of different ways. I don't know. But I just want you to know what's going on. And this kind of explains the tariff situation. And I hope that helps, generally speaking. So again, these are slides for you guys to use. Use them with your buyers, use them with your sellers, teach them in your offices, explain these things. I don't see a lot of significant change right now, but as we know, this is a very unpredictable environment. So these could change. And if they do, you'll get new slides to work with and you'll be ready to go. So I hope this helps, gang. Again, this is Brian Icenhower with Icenhower Coaching and Training. Good luck in 2025.